Good morning. Hello.
Hello.
Are you with the catering service?
Morning. Morning. I didn't want it to end this way. I didn't read this way.
I know it's difficult. Did you sleep all right?
Fine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. You know, when we love someone for a long time, we assume certain things will always be true, that they will know our name, that they will recognize our face, that when we walk into a room, they will look up and know, that is my person. Today, I want to tell you about the morning that changed for Tu Diep and about what she did when it did. This one is going to stay with you. Let's take it one step at a time. It happens on an ordinary Wednesday, not a special day. No anniversary, no birthday, just a Wednesday in November, with gray clouds outside and the smell of coffee in the kitchen. Tu Diep comes downstairs early. James is already at the table, sitting in his usual spot, hands wrapped around his mug, looking out the window at the garden. "Good morning," she says. He looks up, and for just a moment, just a half second, there is nothing in his eyes. No recognition, no warmth. Just a polite, blank look. The kind you give a stranger. Then it passes. "Morning," he says, and looks back out the window. Tu Diep stands very still in the kitchen doorway. She keeps her face calm. She goes to pour herself coffee. Her hands are steady. She is proud of that. Now, I want you to understand something. The doctors had told her this would come. They had used careful clinical words. Progression, episodes, periods of disorientation. Tu Diep had nodded. She had taken notes. She had driven home and made dinner and helped Nai with her homework and not said a word about it. She had prepared herself, or believed she had. But there is a difference between knowing something is coming and feeling it arrive. She sits across from him at the table. She wraps her own hands around her coffee mug. Did you sleep all right?" she asks. "Fine." He nods, still looking at the garden. The birds were at the feeder early. They always are in November. He glances at her, polite, distant. "Do you take milk in that?" Tu Diep looks down at her coffee. Black, the way she has taken it for 10 years. The way he has made it for her every single morning for 10 years. "No," she says quietly. "I take it black." "Ah." He nods. "Smart. I always put in too much milk." And he goes back to watching the birds. Tu Diep sits with him for 20 minutes. She does not try to remind him who she is. The doctors had said not to. Don't argue. Don't correct. Don't make them feel lost. Just stay calm and stay present. So she stays calm. She stays present. She talks about the birds, about the weather, about nothing in particular. And slowly, the way light comes back into a room when someone opens a curtain. She watches James return. It is not dramatic. It does not arrive all at once. But around the third cup of coffee, he looks at her differently. Something settles behind his eyes. "You're up early," he says. Just like that. Like no time has passed. Tu Diep smiles. "So are you." Couldn't sleep. He reaches across the table and covers her hand with his. "So you should go back to bed. Get some rest." "I'm fine right here," she says. And she means it. She does not tell him what happened that morning. She thinks about it. Wonders if she should, but he seems himself again, warm and easy and present. and she decides, not today. Not this morning. She will carry this one alone for now. She is getting good at that. That afternoon, her mother calls. They talk every few days now. It has become easy, natural, the way things become when you give them enough time. How are you? Her mother asks. Fine, Tu Diep says, then stops. Actually, not fine. It happened this morning. A pause on the other end. He didn't know you. For a little while. Then he came back. Her mother is quiet for a moment. What did you do? I sat with him, talked about the birds. That was the right thing. I don't know if there is a right thing. There is, her mother says firmly. You stayed. That is always the right thing. Tu Diep looks out the window at the garden. The bird feeder is empty now. She should refill it. Mom, she says. Yes. Will you come on Sunday? I think I just need everyone close right now. I will be there Saturday evening, her mother says. I'll bring soup. Tu Diep laughs despite herself. You don't have to bring soup. I want to bring soup. Let me bring soup. Okay, bring soup. Here's what I learned that Wednesday morning. Grief does not always look like tears. Sometimes it looks like sitting across from someone you love and talking about birds, because that is the only thing you can do. Sometimes the bravest moment of your day is keeping your hands steady while your coffee goes cold. Tu Diep had prepared herself for a lot of things. She had read the pamphlets. She had spoken to the doctors. She had organized the folder and read the letter and cried until there was nothing left. But you cannot fully prepare for the moment someone looks at you. Someone who knows every corner of your life and sees a stranger. All you can do is stay in the room. And she stayed. Saturday evening, her mother arrives with 2 containers of soup and a small paper bag of the dried chrysanthemum tea James likes. Tu Diep stands in the doorway and feels something loosen in her chest. You remembered the tea, she says. Of course I remembered the tea. That evening, the 4 of them sit together in the living room. Nai is doing homework at the coffee table, muttering to herself about long division. Her mother is in the armchair with her knitting. She has taken it up recently. She says it keeps her hands busy. James is on the couch with a book open in his lap. Tu Diep sits beside him. She is not reading. She is just watching the room. Nai mutters. Her mother's needles click. Somewhere outside, a car passes. James turns a page. Then, without looking up from his book, he says, Your mother's gotten very good at that. At what? The knitting. He tilts his head slightly. She's almost finished a whole row since she sat down. Tu Diep looks over at her mother. Her mother catches her eye, raises an eyebrow. Tu Diep smiles. She's been practicing, she says. It shows. He turns another page. She's a quick learner. Don't let her hear you say that. She'll expect a compliment every time. James lowers his book just enough to look at Tu Diep over the top of it. And he smiles. That smile. The one she fell in love with 10 years ago. The one that starts slow and reaches his eyes last. Then I'll save it for special occasions, he says. Tu Diep laughs. A real laugh. Surprised out of her, and from the armchair, her mother smiles quietly at her knitting and says nothing at all. Later, after Nai is in bed and her mother has gone to the guest room, Tu Diep and James sit on the back step outside. The night is cool, clear. More stars than usual. James has a cup of tea. Tu Diep has a blanket around her shoulders. They sit close together the way they have always sat, his shoulder against hers. "Good day today," James says. "Yes," Tu Diep agrees. "A good day." A comfortable quiet. Then James says, "I have more bad ones now, don't I?" Tu Diep does not answer right away. She looks up at the stars. "Some mornings are harder than others," she says carefully. "This morning was hard." She looks at him. He is still looking up at the sky. His face is calm, thoughtful. "You remember?" she asks. "Not exactly, but I can tell. Afterward is I can always tell." He wraps both hands around his mug. Your face goes very careful, like you're carrying something and trying not to drop it. Tu Diep is quiet. "I'm sorry," he says, "for those mornings. You don't need to apologize for something you can't." "I know." He turns to look at her. "I know I can't help it, but I'm still sorry it happens to you." Tu Diep pulls the blanket tighter. "On the bad mornings," she says slowly, "I just wait, and you always come back. So far." "So far," she agrees. He nods, looks back at the sky. "When I don't," he says quietly. "When the day comes that I don't come back, I need you to know something. James, let me say it." He is gentle but firm. "When that day comes, whatever version of me is sitting at that table, he's still glad you're there, even if he doesn't know why, even if he doesn't know your name." He pauses. "Some part of me will always know you belong in the room." Tu Diep does not trust her voice, so she leans her head against his shoulder, and he puts his arm around her, and they sit like that under all those stars until the tea goes cold, and the night gets quiet, and neither of them wants to be the first to go inside. Here's what I learned that night on the back step. Love is not only about being remembered. Sometimes it is about staying anyway, showing up anyway, sitting on a cold step in November and watching the stars with someone who may not always know your name, but will always know that you belong beside them. Tu Diep used to think that love was something you held on to. Now she understands. Sometimes love is something you let go of, gently, carefully, piece by piece. And you trust that what remains is still enough, still real, still him. And for now, for this night, this step, this sky, it is more than enough. It is everything.